Today we get to talk about something that I've been interested in for at least 13 years, and that is Japanese skateboarding and the evolution of Japanese skateboarding going from what it was then to where it is now, which I think a lot of you probably have a pretty solid understanding of how far Japanese skateboarding has come. So let's start off with who I think really broke into the Western market from Japan. And it's not a Japanese skateboarder in America, it's like full-on Japanese skateboarding, and that is Go Miyagi. I think that's how you say his name. But 13 years ago, he put out a part, and it came into America. It's from a video called Overground Broadcasting. And I remember watching this part for the first time and my mind being blown. It got on YouTube 13 years ago, as I've said, and at the time, traditional skateboard videos, when there's a video part, you try to highlight the best skateboarding that you can do. So usually these parts would have 50 tricks or so. They'd all be different tricks. The video parts would be like 3 to 6 minutes, and that's kind of how we were doing it in the West. But then all of a sudden you have this guy, Go Miyagi, show a part where I would say a third of the credit has to go to the editing. It's amazing. I'll talk about that in a second. But his part was almost all 50-50 grinds. He just did like 9/10 50-50 grinds and then had a few feebles here and there, but that was pretty much the one trick he did. And the thing that he kind of brought into, I think, our brains in America was the idea of doing similar tricks or even basic tricks in a way that nobody did them before. So doing it on an obstacle that you didn't even know could actually work. And he was grinding and holding his balance in a way that I think we really didn't understand, at least here in the West. And it seemed like it was the kind of talent that came from having the time to explore new ways of skateboarding rather than just trying to regurgitate what you saw in skate videos before. Like, my skateboarding pretty much comes from just what I watched in skate videos and expanding on that. But Go Miyagi seemed like he had this new, unique perspective that he got from just what existed amongst him and his friends in this place. So a few notes from this part I obviously want to state is he also had flashes of anime and manga throughout, and it wasn't near as popular as it is now, obviously, but seeing that back then too, it was part of that, like, whoa, what is this? Oh, it's cool. He's adding like cartoony effects in his videos, and the editing was just so spontaneous and bizarre. And I know that Japanese TV at the time was more like that. It was definitely a lot more eccentric, and his part showcased kind of what was happening in Japan. And also, if you listen to the song, it's like a traditional Japanese song, and it's super fun to watch, and it really does make you feel like you're in an alternate universe watching this video with no rules. And speaking of the rules, he skated in a skate park in his part, which was deemed as like a total offense in the West. But right from the beginning, you can tell that this dude is not playing by the rules. So when he's skating like a flat bar, he frontboard a fakies a flat bar, which I think is just so funny. And then he's skating on a mini ramp, and he does this cool, unique trick that has become a little more commonplace now. But of course, at the time, it was, I mean, it like blew my mind. I was like, I feel like this dude has figured out how to ride in a way that nobody else has. Also, this flat rail spot, I just had to take a note that this was like so beautiful looking. Also, huge eye blown, mind blown part is when he grinded the rail and his friend lifted the rail and then he grinded down. One, how strong is his friend? I feel like that had to have weighed at least 200 pounds, and he just lifted it like it was nothing. Also, it was really exciting to see someone in a part acting goofy. I felt like that wasn't a common thing in skate parts at the time. I felt like there was this whole like edginess being brought into skating, and I actually feel like that's almost more prominent now, where people are kind of into this like edgy feel of skating. And it was cool to see at the time that he was just being playful and silly, and I think that's still what inspires me today. I think that's why I've always been such a big fan of Enjoy videos, is because they know how to showcase that goofy side. And then I want to show this last part because I think it just perfectly encapsulates the whole feel of this part. It's like a 20 to 30 second clip, and it's like him versus the final boss. So the last like minute and a half of this video is him doing his ender, which you might be like, how does that last for a minute and a half? But here's like a 20-second part to kind of showcase that. And you might think, what happened to him? Was that it? Was he a one and done? No, actually a few years later, actually like 6 years later, 7 years ago on Thrasher, he uploaded a part for Heroin Skateboards, I'm pretty sure, and that part has twice as many views, and I think that was like the evolution of that part, where he did a lot more skateboarding tricks. He showed a lot more variety in what he was capable of, and of course his creativity like quadrupled. Like the things he was doing in this part really blew people's mind, and that's probably why it has over 3 million views, which is wild for a skate video part. But unfortunately for his Instagram, he does that whole thing that I really hate when skateboarders do, but I totally understand, where he like posts clips and then he deletes them, so you don't get to like, you know, go back and look at them. And I mean, of course that sucks for people like me, because I want to just absorb all the Go Miyagi I can. That sounded really wrong, but he did really, really fun creative skateboarding in those videos, where he would like go out on a flat rail in the middle of a pond and like grind across, and he was like fully dry, so he must have just been able to stand and grind across rails over water without ever falling. It's really wild. So that is kind of like the 13-year-old version of skateboarding I wanted to talk about, that the Western people saw of Japanese skateboarding. Obviously, if you're in Japan, you probably had a much different interpretation of what skateboarding was. If you grew up skating in the last 13 years, you probably saw a lot more scenes. But in the West, this is kind of what was brought to our attention. And I feel like the next real big renaissance of Japanese skateboarding in America kind of came around 5 years ago, when, of course, there was a lot of brands like Adidas kind of pushing some Japanese skateboarders. There was a few other brands, but one of our friends and fellow YouTubers, Luis Mora, moved out to Japan about 4 years ago, because he was just someone who grew up, you know, really excited about Japanese culture, and he wanted to experience that world. And he immediately went into the skate scene. And it was really interesting, because the skateboarding that he started to showcase was like the opposite of Go Miyagi. It was a very, very structured, perfected skateboarding that reminded me a lot of primitive skateboarding. And Luis Mora showcased a lot of different Japanese skateboarders, but there were a few that he showcased the most, and I have their names written down, probably saying them wrong, but there was Kinosuke, and then Takuya Ishizuka, and they were the two skaters that he showcased a lot. That cute little kid skateboarder that Luis Mora showed, I mean, the video has like over 10 million views. That's actually the Takuya Ishizuka's little brother. So he was showcasing a lot of like these very structured, unbelievably talented skateboarders in Japan, and the skateboarding looked completely different, obviously. It was like, it's a type that I love. I love that kind, because I really do like the idea of just like learning a lot of tricks, doing them really well. I think it's really fun to see people do tricks in a way that is very difficult for someone like me to achieve, and that's what you saw a lot of, and it was really fun to watch. It was really inspiring, and it really made you want to go out there and like practice your structure. But it's just funny, like the difference to see, you know, 10 years before that, what Go Miyagi was doing. And I'm sure, of course, in Japan, there's still a lot of that type of skateboarding. It kind of reminds me, I feel like, you know, Korea is probably next in line to have a similar type of renaissance. And in Korea, what I've seen is also something similar. There's a lot of structure. There's a lot of like, the outfits are very similar as well. They have the quirky skateboarders, obviously, and a ton of types of different skateboarding, like longboarding too, in Korea. But, you know, I think what kind of like always shines above is that structure, at least for today's day and age. That's why primitive skateboarding is so successful. So you want to see people do switch full back tails? Boom, they gotcha. So what from there? So Luis Mora did that for a couple of years, and then he moved back to America. And I'm not sure what's going on with his team, but I remember at the time he had, I think, 3 to 4 of these Japanese skateboarders as a part of his team, which was called Erased, or is called Erased. And now it's Kinosuke, who is, I think, the last rider from Japan on the team. Maybe, I don't really know. I shouldn't speak on that, but that's who actually came to America and is spending time with Luis. And he has a very LA thing happening right now, because that is kind of where he grew up. That's where he feels more comfortable. He can speak the language really well. And as fun as Japan was to watch for us as viewers, I bet it was a lot tougher for someone like Luis to kind of live there when you can't speak the language. I mean, that sounds really difficult. So that was kind of the last of, you know, that much content coming out of Japan for a while, because he was like a funnel for that. So where is Japanese skateboarding today? Let's talk about the Olympics. Yuto Horigami, oh my goodness gracious, this dude. Ironically, 4 years ago, Luis's second video in Japan was about Yuto, and his skateboarding was so much different. He was nowhere near where he is today. He was obviously very structured. His sponsors grew very quickly. He was on Blind Skateboards, and then he migrated over to Shane O'Neill's company, who also the young Brazilian girl, Raya, rides for. So props to Shane O'Neill, one of the best skateboarders in the world, for having some of the biggest, most shared showcase skateboarders in the world out right now. I can't imagine April Skateboards isn't doing super well. And I remember him leaving Primitive and thinking like, dude, why didn't you just stay on Primitive? Just get all these people to go on Primitive. But I think he's actually found like a niche, a pocket in this skateboarding world that is going to highly benefit his brand. So congrats to Shane O'Neill. But Yuto Horigami, what is significant about him? What people have said is that there is Nyjah Huston, which is the best skateboarder in America, and how can you beat Nyjah Huston? He's been training since he was a little kid, he's unbelievably talented, he's like, deserves everything he has, yada, yada, yada. In one of the contests, in one of the street leagues, Nyjah Huston performed like Nyjah Huston. He landed pretty much every trick that he normally lands, but somehow Yuto Horigami won. And I think that was like the breaking point to where it was like, oh my gosh, this training that these Japanese kids have been doing in skateboarding, even though I think Yuto even said himself, it doesn't feel like training. He's just skating with his friends, but he's just doing it a lot because he loves it so much. I think people who kind of love the thing they're doing the most will probably end up being the best at it. And it shows. The tricks that he does, they're not like the standard traditional tricks that we grew up in the West learning. If you look at Nyjah, the tricks he does to me is the compounding expansion of the tricks that we got into. We liked big spins, we liked back threes. So Nyjah learned big spin front boards, back three lip slides, but now Nyjah's taking it to where he's doing full cab flip lip slides. It's like an extension. But Yuto goes a completely different route. He does weird, obscure tricks like nollie back 360 lip slides, nollie back 360 nose slides. He has this nollie positioning where it is supreme above all other skaters, I feel like, and he can skate switch the same way. So he's doing tricks that you rarely see on flat bars down these massive skate park handrails every single try. And on top of that, the girl who won the skateboarding Olympic street section is also a girl skater, and she's front crooking down the massive handrail there. So Japan now, in terms of contest skateboarding, are really, really bringing it. And I feel like we're not gonna see the end of this anytime soon. And I feel like, honestly, Japanese skateboarding, in a sense, is going to be what America can aspire to soon, or even now. Like even now when I go skate, I'm like, I want to learn these nollie tricks like Yuto. I want to have that nollie stance that he has, instead of looking at a lot of what in the past we were looking at American skaters. And I'm sure a lot of Japanese skateboarders like Yuto grew up watching things like, yeah, right, watching the same videos I watch and being inspired by Eric Costin, etc. Even though Eric Costin is actually an Asian skateboarder, but he grew up in America, in California, so people identify him as an American skateboarder. So this is where Japanese skateboarding is today, and I want to know your opinion. Does Japanese skateboarding excite you in a way when you see footage over in Japan? Does it feel like this cool, new, quirky world? And of course, today's day and age, we live in a world where Japanese comics, anime, and manga are just massive, exploding into the scene. I think they're actually very, very mainstream actually as of today, and I think Japanese skateboarding is fitting right in there. So we're getting so much Japan so consistently all the time here in America. I, for one, love it. I love seeing any new culture being brought into America. I think that's kind of like the thing about America, right? Is that we have so many different cultures kind of mixing into one, so we get to experience like the world here. And I feel like that's just so fun. And seeing the Japanese skateboarding has just been like, it's been really exciting and really fun. And obviously in America as well, we have a lot of the quirky skateboarding, the solid skateboarding. We have all of the same things, you know, but it's cool to see where it's come. It's cool to see that a small island like Japan can bring in, you know, hard-hitting talent that wins gold at Olympics. Very fun. Anyways, that's pretty much the gist of what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to bring up the subject because I just thought it's a thing that we're all talking about. So just think about this as like, you know, your homie talking about the things that we talk about in skateboarding. Every Thursday, I'll be uploading these kind of videos for a while, and on Tuesdays are the vlogs, and on Saturdays are my shorts. I'm really glad that the response to the last video I made about the Braille Pros did so well and got such good feedback. I really appreciate you tuning in and watching these videos. Really makes me happy that people like seeing these things, and I just want to have these conversations because honestly, you know, I'm like a older dude who just likes talking happy things. I get really suppressed easily when there's too much like negativity. I'm like, oh, it's like a cloud. I think it's because I'm just older, so I'm like, I'm done being a teenager. I don't want the cloud of, you know, anxiety and darkness over me anymore. I'm an adult. Just let the sun hit me in the face. So I'm trying to bring that to the people out there who want the same thing. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Take care. Progress daily. I'm sorry if I spit on myself a lot. I spit a lot when I talk. Take care, progress daily, and keep killing it.